It's a good afternoon to the Sportsfan Radio panel. We're back and plenty happening in sport. Now, before we start with you, Paul, and discuss NRLW and NRL gelding, there's a couple of early races that you'd like the viewers to know about so that they can get on. Otherwise, they might miss out.
Yes, Professor. Look, a couple of tips today, and we'll talk about them later on. Races at Sandown and Wodonga today. Love the Sandown meeting. 4 of the big jumps meetings. So, look, there's one in Wodonga, race 2, number 10, over Rhyme. Shane Nichols, only king at Wodonga. He can get round about the 250 mark. But I like a bet at Sandown at 12.55. Race 2, number 3, Stern Idol. Professor Mar Eustace, ridden by him in the Chris steeplechase. But we'll talk a bit more about the others a bit later on, Professor.
All right, Gelding, thanks for those tips. Paul, the NRLW kicked off round 3 with a double header together with the men's Roosters and Sea Eagles on Thursday night. The Roosters 30, the Dragons 0. Roosters third on the ladder.
Looking like a tough for St George all round, men's and women's. And I don't know how the juniors are going at the Dragons, but the ladies, who've been a great team over the journey of this women's competition, they're struggling, as 30-0 would suggest. But the Roosters are far and away favourites. They're just over $2 mark, which in a team of 10 is pretty short, Professor, 3 weeks into a 9-week comp for the Roosters. So they're looking very impressive. Dare I say it, as impressive as the Panthers in the men's side, as we'll get to.
Paul, I had a look at the highlights. The number 6, the 5'8", Taryn Aitken, scored a try, gave 2 away. Another one was disallowed because of a forward pass. She looks like a very impressive player.
Very impressive indeed. It brings to mind that, Adam, I'm sure you've seen it with the French men's soccer team, and they show all these goals being scored, and you assume it's the men because they've photoshopped the men's faces over the women's bodies. So you just don't know that it's the women playing in the ad. And then they show that it's actually the women playing. And the skill level of the women's comp this year is just absolutely amazing. Some are saying it rivals and even exceeds the men's competition, just the skill they're showing. And it's been a really vast improvement, I think, on the inaugural seasons.
Yeah, another player I liked in the highlights, Amalia Casacala, a second rower, Paul. She ran over 2 defenders to make the try line. She is a big unit.
Yep, it reminds me of the Aldi when they used to have those catalogue sales, and there'd be some. I'd get trampled sometimes on the way into the door to pick up the jumping castles on sale there at Aldi. So there's been some superstars this year. The Cowboys are up there as well, and the Reckoning, which is great for new teams in the comp. Good to see that area. But the area that I'm most excited about is the Titans. And as I said, could they be the first team in any code to actually go on and win a big competition? They're 3 from 3, the Titans. And you don't need Steve Blocker-Roach to say 3 from 3. You can't do any better than that.
Well, especially when they beat the Sharks 10-8, Paul.
Yeah, that's a big effort. I actually have the Sharks finishing quite high up on my ladder. I did have the Titans, I think, sneaking into the finals as well. So you've really got some good, solid teams coming out of great areas. And Gold Coast is a great rugby league area, and it's great to see a team from there. And the Sharks area where I grew up, I know firsthand how popular rugby league is, touch football is, and women's rugby league.
The Titans were lucky, Paul. The Sharks let them out of jail. The Sharks fumbled on their own 20 with about 2 minutes to play, and that set up the try for the Titans. But you can only do what's presented to you.
Yeah, I still think they're quite dangerous, the Sharks, and the Titans perhaps are overachieving, but they can enjoy it up there while it lasts. They look finals bound, and they're in the reckoning to win it all, many are saying.
Doubleheader today, Paul. Interesting kickoff time. Why would the NRLW select 12:03? I know why. They didn't want to clash with the start of this show.
That's it. And the guy running the comp now used to run the trains in Munich. No, I don't know who came up with that specific time. It is very precise, isn't it? But
It won't start at 12:03. Let's be honest. Rugby league has never started a game on time, so it probably starts at 12:05.
very good point. That you often have them still in the rooms when they're supposed to kick off. But I do, if you want to add your tips there, Gelding. There's a player for the Raiders on later on this afternoon, 150.
Yes.
I'm not Ruben Wickie's daughter. I'm Mackenzie Wickie. So she wants to come out and show that she's pretty useful in her own right. And I can understand that in any code, you've come out a big shadow. Ruben Wickie is one of the best players ever for the Raiders, but his daughter is on the up. She'll play for Australia, I've got no doubt. And she's paying the snappy little $3.60 to score a try today. So
Anytime score.
anytime, Gelding. Not to go first, anytime at all. So you got 80 minutes to wait for your return, but I'm pretty sure you'll get one.
Beautiful.
I was listening to the NRL commentary the other night, and they made a mention of how much the NRLW's improved. Now, it continues to amaze me that they make statements like that, because it's only natural that it will get better. But it certainly has. Obviously, with the new teams coming in as well, Paul, is that you would think that, like AFLW, that the talent would be diluted. But when it comes to the NRLW, it does seem as though the talent is there.
Yep, and that's the thing. It's not like a finite pool. I think it's bringing people out to have a go and to back themselves. I mean, how many seasons of The Voice have we had? How many people are good on a guitar? There can't be many left, but they seem to keep finding these superstars. These areas they've gone into, though, they've done strategically and selectively there. There's a lot of good young local talent that wouldn't otherwise be known but for this competition. So I do have to, I'm not taking issue with your point, but there are some competitions that haven't built on it. And here's looking at you, the Big Bash, you know, in that it's not automatically perceived and automatically guaranteed success that competitions will improve. But I think they've done it smartly, as you say, and they've put teams in areas where there is the talent pool. And their areas, I mean, I grew up in the Shire area. There's 400,000 people there. So they're going to find enough women's rugby league players just from that area alone, let alone get other areas that they're getting their players from. So that Sharks team will be really good this year and great for the area.
And I think the other thing that is the Gillaroos as well. If you look at the success of the Australian Sevens, those players now have the ability to play professional sport, which is the NRL, and there's certainly been that crossover factor, and they certainly bring a lot to the equation.
Yeah, we've talked on it several weeks now. I don't call it piggybacking off the men's game. I say it's running in conjunction with the men's game, and it's getting the ratings, it's getting people settling down, watching the footy, rather than trying to make it as a standalone, which it might work as, but they're running in tandem quite well.
Paul, isn't that the key point? The women's competition in NRNL seems to be enhanced, and the league, the men's league and the women's league are run, you know, even though they're independent, there's still, and the league body's right behind it. Whereas we see in the AFL, the Big Bash, maybe there's just that, the women's are a secondary thing and we'll just manipulate it around. I think the rugby league should be congratulated for the way that they've endorsed and handled their women's competition. And that's why it's probably coming close to the take-out netball, probably the nation's best women's competition.
Yeah, it is great. And I think I'd use the word umbrella in that they run under the same umbrella. There are a few glitches, like when you go on the NRL website, you're in the women's comp and you click on ladder, and it takes you to the men's ladder. So that you've then got to go to a drop down. But I don't think that's intentional, but it is all part of the one family.
But Paul, I don't have any, I was on there, and it is so much easier to navigate the NRL site to get to the NRLW than what it is. Anything to do with the AFL is just a cluster. And so all you do is you go up and they've got the 5 different ladders there. And they've got, which just encompasses the whole game. Like, we talk about it being separate, but it's like it's all one body. And if you want to deal with the AFL, use them as an example. how hard it is to find one AFLW stuff. VFL, you give up at times because it's so pathetic to find it. Whereas with the NRL, they're sort of going, well, we've got these great pathways. Let's show it.
Yeah.
All right, Paul.
It's good. And what I like as well, that there doesn't seem to be too many teams that are basket cases either. So you might think if the talent pool was small that you'd have teams being absolutely belted, but you've still got, I mean, the Dragons lost 30-0. They'll bounce back. And the Cowboys lost 40-12 to the Broncos, but they'll be back as well. So there's no teams you really would write off.
Paul,
Maybe the Eels, Professor. You might have a red pen through the Eels. That's about all. If you do want to wave the red pen around Harry Potter style, the Eels would be the other one. I think you could put it through already.
all right, Paul. Well, the first game for decision this afternoon, the winless Eels playing the Knights, who have got a 1-1 record. Who's going to win that one and why?
There is a real buzz in Newcastle, and not just for the men's team, but also for the women's team. And it's great because I've said it many times, Newcastle's like Geelong. You won't find many people from there who don't go for that team. And I think the Knights will carry on the Novocastrian fever that struck the NRL and rugby league generally. I think they'll win that 24-10, the Knights.
And then at 1:45, we've got the surprise packet Wests, the new team who've won 2 from 2, playing the Raiders.
$1.90 each way, so you don't get much closer than that. So I think on
the
the back,
money.
don't call me Ruben's daughter, Mackenzie. I think the Raiders will get home over the Tigers.
So what happens to the other 10 cents in the bet? Even though it's supposed to be an even money game, the bookies win again.
No, I think that's called the house margin, I'd say. But if it was $2 each, it'd be charity, I think. So.
The 5%, the 5%, win bet. Yeah, very good.
And a final score on that game, Paul?
I think it'll be close, 18-16 to the Raiders.
All right, let's look at round 23 of NRL, and that started back on Thursday night. The Roosters with a great first half, 18-2. Schooners fairly upset. The Sea Eagles outscored the Roosters after half-time, but it was too late.
Yep, it's been a tough week for me, seeing the Roosters stay alive. Apologies, Roosters fans, and also my Rabbitohs we'll get to. But it was a good win, the Roosters. They're still alive. They do have Terminator-type qualities. There's too much quality in that team for them not to make the 8, but geez, it's touch and go. They want to get a move on. Manly, unfortunately, won't make the 8 this year.
Well, you've just taken my question from Schooner. Is there any hope?
No, well, there's always hope, and it's very tight. It's a logjam. I saw buses in New Delhi not as crowded as around that 8 mark in the NRL. So there's a chance, but they're at the back of the pack. You'd have to say that. Sorry, Schooner.
Well, the Sea Eagles have got Penrith next week, so that's not a good start to trying to get into the 8.
Well, we'll get to Penrith, but they are looking unstoppable, and I almost didn't want it to happen again. As much as I love the team in terms of their skill levels, but wow, they're looking amazing. They made the Storm, and we'll get to that. Look second rate, and that doesn't happen often with the Storm. I tell you, they've got to get Pappenhausen back and pretty quickly. I wanted to say, talking surprise packets with the women's game, surprise packet in the men's game has to be the New Zealand Warriors. And when we say it's great for Newcastle that a city's loving their footy, it would have been nice if the Aussies beat the All Blacks, because that would have made the Warriors the talk of New Zealand, because they're up into 3rd place. I think it is the Warriors. That's not something anyone would have predicted. They're playing great football. Sean Johnson will win the Dally M medal, and he has come alive back home in New Zealand. They're a really good team to watch, the Warriors, and they're well coached, and they could be the dark horse.
Well, he's got Coach of the Year sewn up, surely, Paul. The coach of the Warriors, what he's been able to do with that group this year. And obviously, I think this is their first season, full season, being able to play back at home. But the other night on the Gold Coast, you would have thought it was a home game with the Warriors crowd that was in attendance. But one thing they've always done, and since their start, is that they play attractive football. They offload, and they offload to their detriment at times. But the pass from DZW on Friday night to set up the try for, I think it was Johnson. You'll go a long way to see a better pass than that. So they are good to watch. I thought the Titans showed a little bit more. Obviously missing a few key players, but certainly the Warriors, they'll play finals this year, and you actually would not want to play against them. Again, Penrith, we'll talk about them obviously, but from another perspective, you probably wouldn't want to be playing the Warriors the way that they play.
Because they'll have a nation on their back, and you're a tennis man. They'll be like that guy in the locker room. Everyone talks about not wanting to play. I used to joke that they are the most erratic team in Australian sports, the Warriors, but I think that this new coach has got them into a better system, more structured, and they've got enough superstars there, and Sean Johnson guiding the ship. They'll have a whole nation on their shoulders if they make the finals, and that would be amazing for rugby league if they go deep. As much as we want a Gold Coast team to do well, I'd love a whole country to do well just for rugby league generally.
I think the other thing, Paul, is that you've got Johnson, and then the young kid playing at number 6 is obviously learning the craft, but he's certainly been impressive this year. So, as we said, they'll make finals. I'm not sure you want to play them because, as you said, you don't know what you're going to get, but I think it's a great position for rugby league to be in.
It is, and it's just great to see. As I said, a team that used to be so erratic, just finally putting the runs on the board. If we want to get to the Storm, Professor, they were missing their halfback, which is a big out, and it showed because Penrith just looked in attack. Some are saying they're the best team ever, if you don't mind. So they're reaching.
Paul, the thing with the Storm the other night was that, one, obviously they were missing Jerome Hughes, but also missing significant backline players as well. So when you talk backline, we're talking Remus Smith, George Jennings came in, got injured within the first 10 minutes, and then they ran that side all day. But the Storm looked off. The other thing that the Penrith team did very well, and you identified this bloke as one of the best in the world, but they attacked Cameron Munster all night, and they ran a player through him defensively all night. And it certainly showed. He had no impact on the game whatsoever the other night, which is very rare for Munster.
Unfortunately, that can happen with Munster. He can be off, and he'd want to start lifting. Nathan Cleary is I think, proving to be the best kicker ever. Someone put it best that you've had your short kickers proponents like Alan Langer. You had your Andrew Johns who mixed it up, the long and short kicking, but Cleary has it all, and he's just a terminator. So he's just playing so well. But that shows how well Sean Johnson's going if he's going to beat him for the Dally M.
Yeah. Well, obviously Cleary missed a few games, but just on the game the other night, Paul, how's Jerome Luai escaped with a fine?
Yeah, he's very lucky. He's polarising, and it's interesting how polarising he's being because he's up for contract renewal, and the Panthers don't seem in any rush. I don't think they've re-signed him, and I don't know if there's clubs lining up to sign him. The reason is the query will always be, me or you could look good, Cooter, if we're playing outside Cleary. So I'm not saying he's not a great player, but if he wants $1 million a year, he's got to stop being a dickhead, and he's got to actually want a club to say that guy would be great in our locker room. That guy would bring a consistency. All these people come forward. He's had a tough upbringing. He's been through a lot in his life. You know, he's had death threats. Yes, and I don't want to downplay that last one, but you've still got to be a respectable footballer. You can't be an idiot and get away with it forever.
Well, I just thought on the back of the round, so Professor, obviously we were talking about concussions. We saw 2 send-offs. We saw some yellow cards given out for head-high contact. Now, this is a bloke that jumped head high with a shoulder into the head of Nelson or Nasty from the Storm, who was actually being held by 2 players, and then ran away as soon as he did it.
Yeah,
wasn't cited at the time. About 3 minutes later, he was then put on report, and the Melbourne Storm player's gone off under the head bin.
he is 6'5" 20, Nelson, but I just think that Luai's got this white line fever about him, and it extends to post-match when he made that comment after State of Origin at 3 a.m. on Instagram. You all go back to your jobs tomorrow. But that, I know that was inspired by some very, very nasty stuff he received online, trolling, but he's just got to pull the head in a bit.
Paul, is that because a lot of it seems to be like, and take this the right way, it's not meant nastily or anything like that. He just didn't perform in the State of Origin games, which, you know, for the rugby league's right up there. And Munster embarrassed him and, you know, we ended up getting sent off and things like that. Is that kind of, is this a year where, you know, before in Penrith's other years, it was all very clean and very clinical and he was fantastic and stuff like that. Yep. This year he just seems to be off the boil and, you know, in these big highlight games. And, you know, that in itself brings heaps of pressure.
Yeah, the thing is that Cleary's having one of the best seasons ever. So when you've got one of your two halves going that well, he can be a bit of a dickhead, and he doesn't have the security of the contract. The ego in him would want all the money's going elsewhere in the Panthers, and he might be overplaying his hand with the cockiness and think that it's all fun and games. But you got to get serious sooner or later. He's just being an idiot at times, and Penrith's winning despite him.
Yeah.
And that's only because he's in such a good team. Send him to the West Tigers and let's see if that cockiness continues, because he'll have to carry that ship if he was to go there.
All right, Paul.
Like that if he wants $1 million a year.
Paul, can the Storm hang on to fourth spot? It just seems to me they're not playing as well as they usually do at this time of the year.
I think the Bellamy stuff's distracting them there. They can look fantastic and then they can really drop off. So I think this Bellamy talk about whether he's staying or not is really distracting them a bit. I think who you Raiders, Knights, Rabbitohs just behind them. I think if the Rabbitohs get on a run, they might be able to eclipse the Storm into the 4 there. Sharks are playing well as well. I tipped them all year to have a good season. Raiders and Knights, I don't think will eclipse them. So I think the only team that could knock the Storm out of the top 4 are the Rabbitohs.
All right, Paul, let's look at
Even
Saturday.
on the back of last night.
I was possibly. Yeah, so I think the Storm should hold on to the top 4. The Sharks still a surprise packet when they're on, and I think it was more the Sharks. The Rabbitohs didn't show up for the first hour. I have no idea whether they spent the night before at Burswood Casino. It was a big weekend in Perth for the boys, but they certainly didn't come out ready to go. The Rabbitohs. We're talking about $1.15 team we were. And we were just humbled for the first hour by a team that was playing like a bastard. So just a really bad performance by the Rabbitohs. And I think that's about 6. I think we've only won 2 of our last 9, I think it is. So that's not a great record for the Rabbitohs.
So can the Rabbitohs on their current form stay in the top 8, Paul?
They can stay in the top 8, but they certainly won't be challenging Penrith unless that man who was the talk of the week and didn't do much, as Phil Gould seems to be up and about all the time, said that Latrell's yet to deliver on the big stage, which is quite a statement. I think a large part of that might be because he's been injured in the big matches, but he certainly didn't do a lot against Cronulla, enough to win the game. The only thing will prove Phil Gould wrong, who seems to like riling people up more than ever, is to get the Rabbitohs through deep into this final series.
All right, Paul. Dolphins 28, Knights 30. That was that game was played in Perth. Jermaine Isako, 3 tries, a conversion and a penalty goal. He had a day out.
He did. His nickname's been Hollywood, and not because he's too flashy, just because he's great to watch. Isako and Kuda, when you said the Warriors are good to watch, the Dolphins, given the players they've been missing and given it's their first season, a lot of people didn't think they'd win a game. They went very close to beating a white-hot Newcastle team. And I think they're a very good team to watch, the Dolphins, and the people of that area would be proud. And it shows that expansion's working in the NRL. And the Knights got there on class, but it was a very close game. It was actually great watching it. It would have been great for the people of Perth. It was a beautiful day there. I saw someone say, we've got the weather that Queensland dreams about. So it is actually beautiful one day, perfect the next in Perth. It was just a great day for football, and it really was a good match.
Certainly the Dolphins have got the best out of Osako, Paul. He's played 6 seasons at the Broncos and then 1 at the Titans, but he's played 20 games for the Dolphins this season and scored 19 tries. That's nearly won a game. He certainly hasn't been anywhere near that in his last 7 seasons.
Yeah, and if he was a prima donna that the Hollywood name would suggest, he wouldn't be putting in like this, because the Dolphins are a spent force this year. But you can see they're building, and they'll be even better next year when they get some new recruits.
All right, 2 games for decision today, Paul. The 2:00 game, the 11th placed Eels, 2 points out of the 8, taking on the Dragons, who have had a very, very disappointing season. Who do you like in this one?
Well, I was going to say that the Dragons coach, Hook, has turned up on commentary. He's got a boring voice, I'm sorry, but Anthony Griffin, they're going better, Dragons, but the Parramatta will be too desperate to stay in touch with the 8. I think that they'll win quite easy, Parramatta today. I'd say 30-10. They want to stay in touch with that very crowded 8.
All right, and the 4:00 game, Raiders in 6th. If they win, they go to 5th against the bottom of the table, West Tigers.
Well, it's amazing that your dogs have got their hands off that wooden spoon. They've picked up a bit, the dogs. So I think the West Tigers are probably spoon-bound, I have to say. So we'll see what happens. I think the Raiders at home, they should be too strong. And the Raiders desperately need this match to stay in touch with the bottom half of the 8. I think the Raiders will win, but the Tigers are proving a bit more palatable to watch, and they're building on next year. Obviously, still a lot of uncertainty there about what's happening behind the scenes. You've got recruitment managers signing players without Benji Marshall, the coach, to be next year, not even knowing about it. It's all a bit strange there.
When the club chairman or president, whatever his role is, Paul, does an interview, wow. Was amazing to listen to.
Oh, that Pascoe?
No, sorry, it was the chairman.
Oh, Hatsy.
Yeah.
There's some characters there at the Tigers, but they don't seem to be on the same page. The Raiders at home, they're not as good as they were. They used to be unbeatable at home, but they should beat the Tigers, or there's some real issues there at the Raiders.
And the final score?
I think 26-10, the Raiders over the Tigers.
All right. Let's look at the Ashes, which finished last week. Gelding, our cricket scribe, the Aussies went from 2-0 up and looked like they could even cause a clean sweep to 2-2, and without the rain in the 4th test at Old Trafford, probably would have been beaten 3-2 and lost the Ashes. How did you see the whole series?
I heard a lot of whinging over a period of time. I think if you look at the start of the season, if you said we were going to win the World when we went over to England, if you're going to win the World Cup and retain the Ashes, you would say that would be a very, very successful tour, which is what the Cummings team did. Having a look at it and looking at the plays and having the benefit of staying up rather late at night and watching it, the majority of it, you would have to say that the English team may have performed better than the Australian team. And sometimes the tactics of the Australian team in dealing with Bazball seemed rather confusing. And but I suppose the loss of Lyon after the first 2 tests proved very costly in our bowling attack and balancing. Pat Cummings seemed to have a bit of a reluctance to bowl Murphy, the spinner, to replace Lyon, which he never seemed to have. Some of the selections sometimes queried me why Boland only played in the first 2, and then we didn't see him again. And Nessa, who was in fine form over there with bat and ball, didn't play. I've got to say Mitchell Starc bowled fantastically. And some of the English players' comments probably just proved why people think the English are just whinging, moaning flogs, especially Chris Broad.
Sure.
They were very vocal with the stumping of Bairstow and talking about the spirit of the game throughout. Professor, question for you I raised during the Ashes series. If you're a bowler or a batsman and you touch the stumps and the bails when you were playing, were you allowed to do that?
No.
No.
No,
You would be fined or suspended.
the golden rule, don't touch anything.
If I was bowling and a batsman did that, I would have had a few words, and it wouldn't have been, how you going there?
I got to admit, if I'd have been batting and Chris Broad came and touched the stumps and that, the bat may have slipped out of my hands.
Accidentally.
Accidentally, of course. You wouldn't encourage things like that. But if he came anywhere near that, and then you have the last test with the changing of the ball, like, did you see England whenever Australia got on top, they're whinging and moaning about the ball, complaining it, and then, that there's an inquiry into what actually happened. It may have been the old Duke's ball. The one that they changed it to may have been an older version, Professor, an 1819 version, which swung the ball considerably from a flat ball. So
I was going to say, normally that part of the world, when they say new balls, please, that's Wimbledon. But they've got the new ball, and that's the only one they had apparently. Out of all the balls they had, was one that was shinier than a box of cherries.
I would, yes, with the writing on, and I did like Kawaja's comment to the umpire. How come I can see the gold writing on this one and the other one had none on it? Because we'd hit it off.
Yeah.
When we're none for 135.
But Gelding, they started complaining about the ball after the 7th over every time. And as you mentioned, it's from that famous batch of balls that they had in 2018, which they then saved a few for 2019, and all of a sudden, in 2023, we've found another one that's just slipped its way into the box of balls.
David, they started whinging about the balls in the first test in about the 8th over, when when they couldn't Bazball's the saviour of all, and there's Australia making 400. And Professor, going back onto that, in the first two tests, Australian batsmen made 400 in the first and the second test, whereas in the third, fourth, and fifth, we would struggle to make 300. So that is probably the difference. Again, the tactics when with some of the Bazball theories and all that, I really worry. Why bowl bouncers? If batsmen are going to pull away, Professor, you're an opening bowler in your heyday. Now, tell me if batsmen are pulling away from the thing and just swinging the bat, don't you bowl at the bottom of middle stump? Yeah. Why would you continue bouncing them where your only way you're going to get them is, say, caught on the boundary if they hit it to a player?
Well, that's one of the questions I was going to ask you, Gelding, because if you look at the third test, and I said it exactly at that time, so it's not as if I've sat here and looked back in retrospect. While I was watching it, we had England in their first innings 5 for 87. They're chasing 263. And for some unknown reason, we abandon line and length at the tail. And they go from 5 for 87 to 6 for 131 to they were trailing by only 26 after the end of the first innings. Now, they should have cleaned the tail up maximum for 150. That gives Australia a cushion of about 113.
Yep.
It's a totally different test match.
Exactly, Professor. Look, I think the series was a fantastic success. Entertaining cricket, from two sides that I think are very, very close. England are a very, very good side. Rating at the moment is probably third in the world. That may change. Australia has been a very balanced side for a long period of time. Losing Lyon was good. So despite all these incidents that happened with the spirit of the game, the Bairstow stumping, the changing of the ball, Brendan McArdle and the Poms deciding not to have a beer with the Australians at the end of the fifth. I think put those things aside. That's a little bit of being temperamental, but it was a very, very good series, and I think a very even series. The fourth test, the Poms have won series before when they've been washouts in tests that have helped them.
Against us.
Exactly. So I would have thought that the whingings of the Poms and the spirit of the game, remember, game was made in England. They wrote the rules. Australia didn't write the rules, so you're playing by the rules. Brendan McArdle whinging about Bairstow being stung, where he would do anything in his career and tried that himself 3 times. There's 3 incidents of that when he was playing for New Zealand. As I said, broad complaining about the spirit of the game is absolutely crap when you get someone who'll do anything to get a wicket. Stokes, the captain, we won. Even though we lost the test, we won. Some of his statements, fancy saying Anderson, who was a fantastic bowler, he's called him the greatest bowler of all time. Now, I don't know if I'm Dennis Lilly, Jeff
Richard
Thompson, Glenn McGrath, then we'll go to the West Indies, Michael Holding, Malcolm Marshall,
Andy Roberts,
and things like that. He's been a fantastic bowler, and I rate him as an absolute champion, but the greatest bowler of all time. Ben Stokes certainly had a bit of liberty with the truth. So, Professor, as we say it, a lot of incidents, fantastic series. Australia couldn't do any better than win the World Cup and retain the Ashes.
Cooter?
Gelding, out of the Ashes, who's actually improved, or whose standing has actually increased in the Australian team? Because if you look at our batsmen, they made starts and there was only a couple that actually went on with it. Labuschagne, number 1 batsman in the world, got out nearly all to the same shot all the time and was constantly tinkering with his batting technique, stance, etc. Is Alex Carey one of the ones that's actually improved his standing within the team? Is there anyone else that you sort of think, well, we knew he was good, and do you know what I mean? Like, I thought that Alex Carey's keeping was outstanding in the series. His batting at times was up and down, but yeah.
A very good question, David. And I've said all the way along, Carey could play as a batsman. After the Lord's Test, I think the crowds got to him a little bit. I thought his keeping was absolutely fantastic. And to have him coming in as 7 as a bat, fantastic. The couple I would have thought showing improvement, Khawaja used to make runs in Australia and never made them on tour.
Yep.
But the new Khawaja now is making runs everywhere in India, England, would have to be regarded. I'm not a Warner fan, but even though he got his 20s and all that, and especially in the last test, in the last innings, when you've got an opening partnership of none for 135 and you made 50, that's, geez, as the captain, you'd be absolutely wrapped. So I think the openers got starts of about 50. So even though they weren't going on getting big runs, they did it. Labuschagne was a failure of the series. He was renowned for letting the ball go outside the off stump.
Yeah.
Somehow the Poms figured him out, and he was reaching and got caught in second slip too many times. Smith, I thought, was fantastic, those first couple of tests especially. Great. Head, I think, improved his reputation over there.
I was going to say, can I jump in on that? Will he be the next captain, you'd have to think?
Sorry?
Head will be the next captain at the next Ashes going forward?
Well, I was... Why would you drop Cummings?
Because of his tactical lack of tactical nous, you'd have to think. I just don't know if he. I think we won with our talent as opposed to his strategy.
Yeah, look, I tend to agree with you. Some of the tactics, I was very surprised. But if you had a record of Cummings of winning in India, winning in Pakistan, winning and retaining the Ashes, winning the World Cup, that's a better record than some of these Steve Wars, Taylor, Ponting and all these guys haven't been able to do some of those things, yet he's been captain of the side. Even though I know this sounds a bit contradictory, I agree with you. I was completely bamboozled by some of the tactics, but geez, that record's awfully impressive, isn't it?
And he's got a New South Wales cap as well. Sorry.
Well, you know, that's always been the reversible blue cap's got green on the inside of it, hasn't it? Just
there's no point discussing it. He'll be there going forwards. I just wonder how we ever left Travis Head out of the team, though, because it seems. I
think he's been fantastic, and with the ball moving around in England, he's still made runs, so he's going to slaughter him when he gets back here. But you know, I reckon the finer the thing's been.
Mitch Marsh.
He was just off the radar. He came in to replace Green, and Green's going to be the future of the cricket, but I think the Poms figured him out and the Indians figured him out batting-wise, but, not bowling, in a fantastic fielder and that. So, there's a lot to look forward to for this coming summer in Australia.
When Marsh is on...
Sorry?
Oh, sorry. Gelding, why does Pat Cummings cop so much criticism? One, he's the captain on the field, but he would also be getting instructions from... the coach, because they run water out every second over. So it's just not, I would have thought it was just the captain that should be responsible for this as well. It should be also the coach that would be instructing as well, wouldn't he? Because he's got 3,000 computers sitting in front of him. He'd have more data analytics than what they do for fantasy footy coaching. And yet it's always Pat Cummings, his tactics. I would have thought the coach has to...
Spot on. Steve Smith does a lot of the captaincy from, second slip as well. And Andy McDonald, who's a Victorian and, fantastic cricketer. I've got to admit, I question him being, coming from Langer to him, like he just, remember Langer got replaced because he told these guys off, when he thought they mucked up. We can't have anyone telling us off. McDonald just seems to go along with whatever. And, remember the days when they said the Footscray players were coaching Footscray and the coach was just there? It's sounding very much like that at the moment. The cricketers, if anyone comes in and doesn't agree with what they're saying, they're out. I don't know whether, but the records are starting to speak for themselves. It's very hard to say, when you're doing all this, whether England would love that record that we've got over in all these countries.
And we talk about the openers. There's no opener that you would actually replace with Warner with at the moment, because Marcus Harris isn't the answer. There's no one standing. There's no one putting their hand up to say, "Do you know what? I'm the next Australian opener." And the only one you'd probably look at would be Travis Head, but he's comfortable at position 5.
Why change the move? Why, one thing about captaincy, if something's working, you don't change it. So Head gets locked in at 5. You've got Green or Marsh at 6. I'd play Carey at 6, and then have them 7, and then your bowlers. And I think we're going to be right bowling-wise. We've got 5 fast bowlers we can shoot, all world-class. Lyon to come back. I think Murphy, and he proved it in the last test, he can play under pressure and he can hold the bat. He's no mug with the bat. So then,
There might be a bowler. There might be a bowler in West Australia as well that you.
yeah,
That
it
you would include.
might be a bit of a shock factor coming in. So look, the problem seemed to be Kawajo's been fantastic the last couple of series. Warner and Labuschagne was the one. You know, do we give Labuschagne the bad series, or have they figured him out? The ball moving in England may not be the same as in Australia, so he may bounce back and have a big series here. So let's wait and see. But we do have Pakistan, who somehow seem to be able to get a ball to reverse swing. I don't know how, but considerably. So, you know, let's see the spirit of cricket and see how we go. I don't know, boys. Anyone see the Test series differently to me?
No, Gelding, that seems to go. One question maybe to finish on. Why do you think that they were so sparingly using Todd Murphy? Like he took 7 wickets at one every 25 runs, which was the best of any bowler who bowled for Australia, but they just didn't seem to want to go to him.
Well, that's exactly it, Professor. You and I were texting. I remember that fourth test, you know, where he bowled a couple of overs, 4 overs, I think he got, or 2 lots of 3 overs, and then I don't know. We just captaincy coach. I don't know who were given the instructions, but we were bowling just short balls. And he proved if you bowl at the stumps and they come down and swing and miss, you're gone. I think just bad tactics. There was a time where we had about 170 runs to play with. That's the time to bowl him, see whether he picks up 2 wickets. Okay, Stokes was in great form. May have hit him off, but he ended up picking Stokes up, you know, in those things. You know, you don't bowl him when we've only got 50 runs to play with. You got to bowl your spinners, you know, when you got a few runs to play with them. So the tactic is you want them playing their shots,
yeah,
to hole out. But look, but I want to, despite all those things, Professor, we've got to just look. Going over to England, retaining the Ashes is a good outcome.
Oh,
Yeah, did we get?
I agree.
Did we get lucky with rain? Did we get that? And all 4 of those tests where there were results, all 4 of those tests could have gone either way. It could have, you know. So Australia were in all those 4 tests, and so were England. And in those tests, you know, if we make 400 runs in the first innings, you're not going to lose test matches. So, you know, maybe Bazball may be working, but let's get some tactics and bowl at the stumps for Bazball.
Gelding, one question. How can you not bowl 90 overs in a day these days?
Yeah, unbelievable, isn't it? Well, I think Mark said it. They're bringing out water every second over. Batsman, and Australia's got the worst offender in Smith in it. Changes their gloves every bloody third over. Now, of course, if you get hit in the head and there's a helmet issue, players, instead of leaving the ground and being tested, they've been tested out on the ground, have a drink of water. There's a call for another cap, another lid. You know, like those breaks were taken, you know, 10 minutes some of the times.
Yeah.
By the time
just amazing.
Well, again, there was another rule, Cooter, you had to bowl 90 overs in a day, and you got 5, and you had to bowl 30 overs in a session.
Yep.
And if you didn't, you kept on playing till you bowled the 30 overs. And if you had a lunch break, and if you went over 20 minutes, your lunch break was 20 minutes. Oh, no, that puts too much stress on them. Well, yeah, yeah, look, call me old-fashioned, but I think that rule should be enforced. It should be 30 overs, 30 overs a session. If a person gets hits in the head and you've got to do a test on them, retire hurt. You can come back later. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
I
Sounds
just
like
thought there was a couple of things in the series. That was one. The whinging was another. The Channel 9 feed was horrendous.
Yeah.
The camera work was disgusting. Like, the ball would be hit to the fence and they'd still be trying to find the ball. And I thought that the crowd behaviour as well was pretty ordinary, some of the crowd behaviour. But outside of that, you go, the series had everything in it. And you actually wanted
fantastic
more. You actually want more. Like, so, and then, of course, Professor, the other great thing is our female cricketers winning the Ashes as well.
Yes. Well, again, there was another side that I regarded as one of the best sides, the women's cricket side, but the English girls seemed to, made it a very competitive series. But again, is that a series that is token? You play one test and then you play a couple of 50-over games. Why didn't they just play 3 tests?
So the test match, then they've got the T20s and then the 50 overs, and the test match carries more points than each of the others. So, yeah. Well, let's not forget, this was the first real series without Meg Lanning. So, no, it was a brilliant effort by the girls, and
yep.
Has it received the credit in Australia it deserves? I don't think so, because it was caught up in the Ashes.
Australian cricket, both men's and women, both the number 1 rating sides in the world. That doesn't happen too often, and should be looked at as a bit of a golden era, I think. When you look back at it, they'll look at this England trip, the series in Australia, and then followed by Ashes series over there, and both sides, retaining their positions.
And of course, our netball's Professor now have the opportunity to beat England to also be the world champion. So we're in a rich vein of form at the moment.
We are doing very, very well.
Very well done. And it's a great segue to the Women's World Cup. We're down to the final 16 now, gentlemen. Australia's made it to the final 16 without arguably their best player, Sam Kerr, playing a game, including a 4-0 demolition of current Olympic gold medalists Canada, which shot them out of the tournament. How have you seen the tournament so far, Cooter?
Well, Professor, we made it out of the pool of death. It's always one of the pools that we find ourselves in as Australia. We're in the pool of death at every tournament, Paul, aren't we?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So
always the pool of death.
But obviously, the first match was amazing, the atmosphere, and I think you could feel it through the TV. Obviously, we needed a penalty with Steph Catley to get through that. Second match was a bit of a letdown, probably defended poorly and were exposed. And then the third game, what can you say about that, Professor? 4-0. The world got to see Mary Fowler as a potential future superstar. Tony Gustafsson, I'm not sure he's winning a lot of fans with his media work. I was trying to think, Paul, who you would compare him to. Is there a bit of Wayne Bennett about him?
Well, he's gone from being a pariah to a genius just with that one match, but he's got that caginess, sort of smugness, that possibly could remind you of Bennett,
And obviously they won 4-0, finished top of the pool, which means they avoided England in the crossover. They now get to play the team that's the land of Lego in Denmark. So Sam Kerr, will she start? Professor, is probably the big question on everyone's lips. Or do you get her on in the second half and give her 20, 25 minutes and get some match fitness?
Are you thinking already ahead onto the headline of Lego Masters, perhaps, Cooter, if we do?
Well, Hamish, we might roll Hamish Blake out, my friend, or what's the other bloke's name? Mr. Lego or whatever. But
Brickman.
Brickman.
Yeah, brick man. So
You can't walk down the street now without kids asking him to sign their Lego bricks.
Beautiful.
but hasn't but
Professor,
the
can I say
tournament,
one thing on that? I suppose with Sam Kerr being injured, we're getting to see a lot of the Australian players that have played very, very good football and getting to know them without Sam Kerr. But it's almost a perfect position, isn't it? You qualify for the last 16s without one of the best players in the world playing, and you have her to come into the side, whether, as off the bench and things like that. So, look, it's fantastic. We're seeing the other players, we're hearing a lot about them, but now we're also, seeing a lot of them are being world class. I just wanted to ask the boys, what happened to the green and gold in the uniforms? What do we think of the uniforms?
You're referring to the pale blue that they wore in the last game.
Yeah.
Well, is it a teal? Is it supposed to be a green or a pale blue with the blue stripes down there? I haven't seen a national team ever in colours like that, have we?
Well, there's no jumper clash.
Yeah.
It was. I thought it was an interesting selection. It seemed more for aesthetic appearances than actually team
it's a
colours.
very nice uniform and things like that. But if you saw that and you didn't know who was playing, you wouldn't think it's an Australian team, would you?
No,
Paul, one of the other things is the new stadiums or the refit of the stadiums in New South Wales. I know they've copped their criticism, but aren't we now seeing the benefit of having those stadiums configured to a rectangle?
Yeah, even with the Rugby League in Perth, it was a great stadium, but you need to be in a rectangular stadium for football, soccer, and rugby league. Yeah, as you say, it's much better experience. So much better. Much like the terraces in England, it's just confined. Crowds right there, not sitting 50 metres away. That takes a lot away from the atmosphere with a crowd that far away.
And I think
after going to the rugby last week at the MCG, you're just too far away from it. You just need the square ground.
Well, gentlemen, there's one thing we can say about the Women's World Cup that's different to the men's. The notable departures after the group round in the women's: Brazil, Italy, Argentina, Germany. You'd be lucky to see one of those four teams out of the final 16 in the men's, but they're all gone.
Gone. You get a fair price.
Well, the Morocco, was it the Morocco versus Germany game where it ended in a draw, and you see the two different groups together on the field, and the other game did that end up in a draw as well or whatever it was, and the Moroccans, you should have seen them erupt, the minnows of the tournament. But I must say I did feel a little bit for New Zealand. That pool, I think the leader of that pool won a game and I think two draws. They're a bit stiff to go out, but at the end of the day, they probably achieved what they wanted to and won a game and lit the World Cup up on day one.
All right.
Seeing those Moroccans on the field watching the end of the game on the phone and then erupting, it's just got to be one of the pure joys of sport and one of the best highlights, I think, of this year's sport.
All right, gents. Your thoughts on who will win the World Cup from here? Kuda?
Yep, I'll go I don't want to say England because we'll cop all that crap about it's coming home. We'll hear that for the rest of the tournament. But, I think England probably do win it, Professor.
Gelding?
Look, I'll have to agree with David there. Maybe a rank outside a bit Nigeria.
I've got America. Sorry.
All right,
back to back.
What odds are they, mate?
All right. Well, I'm going to go for the home team, Australia.
The Lego Masters. All right.
Yeah.
What, Professor? I suppose. Yeah, I know you've tipped them to win now and stuff like that. But where would you think? Like we're ranked 10th in the world, so if they made the semi-finals, they'd have to regard that as success, wouldn't they?
Yeah. I see them as a top. I now see them after these results as a top 5 team.
Yeah. Okay. So
Professor,
definitely quarterfinals, maybe semi-finals.
and then Professor, the actual tournament itself, you would have to deem this as being a significant success. The attendances, the venues, the numbers have been off the charts.
Oh, and getting the right crowd. Young girls are following it. Fantastic.
Crowds at the stadiums and also television ratings as well have been off the charts.
And this is why, like Paul's talked about the NRLW for years, and you start seeing the translation between on field and people attending to the pathways, and I think it's an exciting period for sport.
Certainly is. I agree with that. All right, let's wrap up the show, Gelding. We've already had your first 2 tips. Any word on how those 2 went?
Sorry, Professor, I missed the first one when we were talking about cricket. I'm just watching Stern Idle racing at Sandown at the moment, and it's coming into the home straight, and it's 5-6 lengths clear. So the good thing about the jumps races being 4,200 metres, they can die quickly, or they can miss the last jump. But without declaring, it looks like Stern Idle's going to be successful.
And other tips?
Other tips, Professor, very much a footy theme. As I'm just watching Stern Idle now 10 lengths in front.
I think you can call it now, Gilden.
I think we can call it. It's won by 15 with the jockey up in the silks.
Yep.
And when you got to wait a couple of seconds for second to come into the screen. Yeah, but I think it'll be very short. I got $1.80 this morning, but oh God, blimey. It's paid $1.30, $1.20 on the totes, but lucky I took the $1.80. At Sandown today, Professor, very much a football theme. In the Grand National Hurdle, I like race 5, number 4, Bedford, named after a sensational bloke in Peter Bedford, who...
Not Toby Bedford?
Yeah, no, not Toby Bedford, Peter Bedford, who won a Brownlow medal. A fantastic footballer. Paul, if he had a play, he played for South Melbourne, so makes him a member of Sydney. But, of course, he didn't have the light blue cap. So he's famously made 100 against Dennis Lilly at the MCG, but couldn't get in the Australian side. So very good batsman, but anyway, not to be. And then race 6 will go horse number 3, Buse, named after the Geelong tough man, Andy Buse, back in the 20-odd years ago. And, of course, his son's currently playing for Geelong. Trained by Mick Price, to be ridden by Blake Shin. We like that. And Wodonga, Professor, we'll go race 3, number 11, Patchouli Dream. So let's see how we go with those.
All right, gentlemen, thanks very much for your participation today, and I'll look forward to talking with you again very, very soon.
Good stuff.
Cheers,
Thank you.
all.